Frontier Hypocrisy, the 1785 trial of a Delaware warrior. On a bitterly cold December morning in 1785, the fledgling settlement of Westmoreland, Pennsylvania, its atmosphere, still thick with the residue of gunpowder and the unresolved animosity of the Revolutionary War, became the stage for a dramatic test of the nascent nation's ideals. Within the confines of a dimly lit garrison cell, a Delaware native named Mamachaga sat in chains, his hands bearing the stains of the blood of 2 white colonists. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Only 14 days remained before his trial, yet a mob already clamored for his demise. The sheer audacity of a lawyer, his breath heavy with the scent of whiskey, who dared to represent him, sent shock waves through the frontier. "You seek payment in beaver pelts," the interpreter whispered incredulous. As the lawyer leaned in to converse with Mamachaga, the indigenous man, his countenance etched with defiance, murmured in Unami, "Inform him that I will barter pelts for my life." Outside, townspeople spat at the garrison walls, their rage overflowing at the mere notion of a savage receiving legal counsel. By nightfall, threats hung in the air like the specter of the gallows. "We will string up the lawyer as well." However, the most unsettling detail lay hidden within the court archives. Mamachaga, inebriated on purloined rum, had committed the killings without remorse, but later sober and in confinement, he had used herbal remedies to cure the jailer's ailing child. Was he a man or a monster, a diplomat or a fiend, and why did his lawyer, risking a lynch mob, argue that his intoxication was relevant in a territory where civilized justice summarily executed indigenous men without the benefit of interpreters? The rope parted twice before Mamachaga finally met his end, but the true question was not how he perished. It was whether a nation founded on the principles of liberty could stomach the notion of a fair trial for a people it had already prejudged. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories, where the untold stories of America's frontier era await. Subscribe to delve into authentic narratives from the heart of the wilderness. In 1784, the Treaty of Paris was barely dry when the newly established United States turned its attention westward, toward the contested expanse of western Pennsylvania. Here, amidst the dense woodlands and rugged river valleys, the Delaware nation, erstwhile allies of the revolutionary cause, found themselves in a precarious position. By 1785, more than 50,000 settlers had poured into the region, creating friction with the indigenous communities who had occupied these lands for countless generations. The air reeked of treachery. The Continental Congress, desperate to settle war debts, had already auctioned off indigenous territories. A weather-beaten trapper, his face marked by decades of frontier skirmishes, spat into a campfire near Fort Pitt. "Freedom for U.S. shackles for them. That's the American way now." His words encapsulated the hypocrisy festering in the Ohio Valley. The Delaware, who had fought alongside patriots such as Daniel Broadhead, watched as their villages were encircled by squatters. The 1784 Treaty of Fort Stanwix, a sham negotiated with Iroquois tribes who had no legitimate claim to Delaware lands, deprived them of their ancestral homelands. Maps of the period illustrate the story. Surveyors' grids dissected hunting grounds, reducing an entire people to outlaws in their own territory. Post-revolutionary America took pride in its Enlightenment ideals, yet its frontier was a crucible of lawlessness. In 1785 alone, Pennsylvania's courts documented 17 homicides in the region, half involving settlers and indigenous people. But these figures conceal a more sinister reality. The majority of killings went unreported, resolved by vigilante lynchings or tomahawk justice. The Delaware, designated friendly Indians during the war, now faced retaliation for raids carried out by hostile Shawnee bands. Guilt by association became the frontier's unspoken code. Mamachaga's trial, a critical juncture, revealed the fragility of civilized justice. The Delaware man accused of murdering 2 settlers, while under the influence of alcohol, became a political pawn. Settlers bad for blood. Officials in Philadelphia, eager to demonstrate their authority, insisted on due process. Yet, how could impartiality exist where juries were packed with land-hungry farmers and indigenous testimony was disregarded? The region's instability was exacerbated by the clash of legal philosophies. While Anglo-American courts emphasized habeas corpus, indigenous justice centered on restorative measures. Reparation, not capital punishment. When Mamoshaga proposed beaver pelts as recompense, the translator scoffed, "Your furs hold no sway here. This is a white man's domain now." The trial's outcome was a foregone conclusion, yet the charade served a purpose. It allowed Pennsylvania's elite to feign civilization, while appeasing the settlers' thirst for vengeance. However, beneath the surface, the historical record reveals a more complex narrative. Journals from Fort Pitt document that Mamoshaga's victims, Smith and Evans, had trespassed on Delaware territory under the guise of borrowing a blanket, a thinly veiled excuse for theft. The rum that fueled Mamoshaga's violent actions, traded illicitly by settlers, exploiting indigenous vulnerability to addiction. Even the jail where he awaited trial symbolized the frontier's moral decay. Inmates shivered alongside their guards, while magistrates feasted on venison. In distant Philadelphia, by 1785, the United States stood at a critical juncture. Could a nation forged in rebellion extend its founding principles to those it had dispossessed? Or would its promise of liberty? In the crisp autumn of 1785, the frontier settlement of Hannistown throbbed with a palpable unease. Mamoktaga Wapala Tonquah in his native tongue, a name that evoked images of tempests and uprooted trees, had become a spectral figure, haunting both Delaware campfires and settler taverns. A veteran of the Revolution's most brutal engagements, he had once fought shoulder to shoulder with men who now labeled him a savage. His scars, imprinted by British steel and settler avarice, recounted a history the nascent nation preferred to ignore. The lawyer, a Princeton-educated Scots-Irishman with ink-stained digits, maintained his office near the courthouse. His ledger, bound in weathered leather, recorded a fateful transaction. On October 12, 1780, for Smith, the roofer requested a woolen blanket, pledged to trade fairly with the Delaware. May God have mercy on them both. Smith, a man whose craving for whiskey rivaled his appetite for risk, vanished into the wilderness with that blanket, initiating a sequence of events that would shatter the frontier's tenuous peace. On November 3, beneath a waning crescent moon, Smith stumbled upon a Delaware hunting camp north of Fort Pitt, the lawyer's blanket draped over his shoulder. Witnesses later testified that he had demanded more than just shelter. Evans, his companion, bartered a jug of Monongahela rye with Mamoshaga, whose hands trembled not from the cold but from a craving no fire could satiate. By nightfall, the cabin reeked of perspiration and spirits. Mamoktaga, his judgment clouded by rum, accused Smith of larceny. "This will reeks of deceit," he bellowed in broken English, according to Freeman, a diminutive trapper, who narrowly escaped with a slashed shoulder. The French trade knife flashed twice, once for Smith's lung, once for Evans's thigh. Blood gathered on the earthen floor, appearing black in the firelight. Yet what transpired next perplexed the militiamen who arrived at dawn. Mamoktaga sat motionless beside the corpses, his knife cast aside. No escape, no defiance, only a vacant stare. Kilbuck, the Delaware sachem, arrived too late. "Our brother's spirit drowned in the white man's firewater," he murmured to the militia captain, his voice faltering. "Now his body will drown in your animosity." Years later, forensic analysis of the cabin's bloodstains would reveal disturbing truths. Smith's wound suggested he had been seated, non-threatening when attacked. Evans's injury angled upward, as if he had turned to flee. But in 1785 such subtleties held no significance. The frontier craved simplicity, a culprit a hanging. The lawyer, navigating through a throng already sharpening ropes, discovered Mamoshaga in a squalid cell. Joseph Nicholas, the translator, sneered as the Delaware man muttered in UNAMI, "Tell him the rum spoke, not me." The attorney's journal that evening overflowed with conflicted thoughts. Do I defend a murderer, or a man trapped by those who profit twice, first from his vice, then from his execution? Outside, the wind howled through the alleys, carrying the echoes of a question no court would address. When a people are driven to the brink, who truly wields the blade? The West Morrison County Jail, a dilapidated timber structure reinforced with mud and despair, stood as a testament to frontier neglect. Rodents gnawed at its walls. Winter drafts whistled through gaps large enough to pass a knife or a bribe by December. Even the sheriff conceded it couldn't confine a drunkard, much less a man the townsfolk wanted dead. Mamoshaga was transferred to the garrison's guardhouse. A stone vault beneath Fort Pitt's barracks, where deserters were once imprisoned. Soldiers called it the Black Hole, a tomb for the living, its air saturated with a stench of mildew and despondency. The lawyer found him there on December 7, 1785. Guided by the flicker of a tallow candle, Joseph Nicholas the translator wrinkled his nose at the malodor. "He won't survive the week," a guard muttered, tossing a corroded key. Mamastaga sat shackled to a damp wall. His breathing labored. The attorney, clutching a ledger, hesitated. "Tell him I can save his life," he instructed Nicholas. The Delaware man's laughter echoed like a death rattle. "Life," he croaked in unami. "The white men stole that when they seized our land. Now they want my breath as well." Negotiations proceeded in fragmented sentences. The lawyer demanded beaver pelts, currency, in a region where coinage was scarcer than compassion. Mamachaga countered with a trapper's pragmatism. 20 pelts for my liberty, 10 for a swift demise." Nicholas, translating, added his own sneer. "He thinks this is a trading post." Yet as the lawyer persisted, a darker truth emerged. The pelts were not Mamataga's to offer. They belonged to his clan, hidden in a cache near the Allegheny. To trade them was to pilfer from his people's survival. The attorney's quill paused above his contract. Outside, a blizzard raged, its intensity mirroring the fury of the gathering crowd. "Execute!" The heathen voices echoed beyond the fort's walls. On December 9th, he made his decision. Returning to the Black Hole, he tossed a woolen blanket at Mamushaga's feet. "Your furs," he declared, "will provide warmth, not liberty." The gesture smacked of Quaker righteousness or calculated performance. Frontier journals later revealed the lawyer's ledger. "A living client is preferable to a corpse." Incapable of payment, yet in that frigid cell, a spark of humanity flickered in the darkness. Mamaka, clutching the blanket, scrutinized his would-be savior. Eureka of apprehension, he conveyed to Nicholas. "Inform him that his benevolence will hasten his demise more effectively than any rope." The lawyer departed without a word, his boots crunching on snow, stained yellow by garrison urine. Behind him, the fort's gates creaked shut, sealing Mamashaga's destiny and his own. For in a territory where justice wore the mask of vengeance, even compassion was a death sentence. Grenadier Squaw's reputation resonated across the Allegheny, a testament to her resilience in a world determined to obliterate her people. Born Wehix Amansa, she who stands firm. She had earned her wartime sobriquet during Braddock's defeat in 1755, when as a 16-year-old girl, she had dragged wounded French soldiers to safety under British fire. Now at 46, her braids streaked with gray, she mediated disputes between Delaware clans and settler magistrates, her voice serving as a bridge between disparate cultures, but bridges she understood were susceptible to burning. The lawyer located her on December 12, 1785, near a frozen tributary of the Kiskiminitas. She stood ankle-deep in snow, disemboweling a buck with a bone-handled knife, a deliberate demonstration of indifference. He approached head in hand, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Mistress Squaw," he began, "your wisdom is required." She remained focused on her task. "You white men are fond of that word, wisdom, as if justice were a commodity you could bottle and sell." The lawyer persisted, his words stumbling over cultural divides. Mamachaga's trial necessitated understanding his wishes, a grotesque charade of due process. Would she inquire of the condemned man whether he preferred hanging or burning? The knife-stilled Grenadier Squaw turned, her gaze reflecting the winter's chill. "You believe death is a matter of choice." She gestured to the buck's carcass, steam rising from its exposed ribs. "The deer does not choose the arrow. It chooses how to meet its end, fleeing or defiant." Mamashaga has already made his decision. In her lodge that evening, beside a fire seasoned with juniper, she illuminated the chasm he had failed to comprehend. For the Delaware death rituals were communal, not transactional. A warrior's passing demanded dignity, not a catalog of colonial atrocities. "You wish him to select his humiliation," she remarked, stirring a stew of venison and bitterroot. Like a child choosing sweets at a market, the lawyer, clutching his inkpot as if it were a talisman, countered with Blackstone's commentaries, the law's cold calculations. Grenadier Squaw laughed, a sound like cracking ice. "Your books are filled with the ghosts of dead men. Ours are inscribed here." She pressed a palm to her chest, where a bear claw pendant rested. Mama Chaga's spirit knows its course. Your hanging it is a trivial matter to him. A mosquito bite on a dying man. As he departed empty-handed, she watched him disappear into the pines. He will learn, she murmured to her granddaughter, that some questions have no answers, only echoes days later. As mobs clamored for blood, Grenadier Squad dispatched Mamactaga, a deerskin pouch tobacco mixed with yarrow, a Delaware remedy for fear. The guards confiscated it, discarding the herbs into a latrine, but the gesture lingered, a silent condemnation of a system that reduced life and death to courtroom theatrics. Her refusal to participate was not cruelty. It was clarity in a society where indigenous voices were suppressed by gavels and gallows. Silence became its own form of protest. And Grenadier Squaw's silence resonated powerfully. The Westmoreland County Courthouse, a boxy limestone structure still exuding the scent of quarry dust, groaned under the weight of spectators. On January 9, 1786, Mamachaga, his ankles chafed by shackles, was paraded past farmers clutching Bibles and Delaware observers excluded from the gallery. Chief Justices Thomas McKean and George Bryan, men who had signed Pennsylvania's radical 1776 Constitution, now presided over a trial that would betray those very principles. Handlin, the newly appointed interpreter, reeked of cheap whiskey and incompetence. A fur trader with limited formal education, he garbled UNAMI into broken English, rendering Mamachaga's pronouncements unintelligible. He says, the jury members resemble weasels. Handlin offered, eliciting laughter. Mamachaga unyielding. Locked eyes with a juror, Ezekiel Carter, a land speculator who had swindled the Delaware out of 300 acres. Hespeth, the epithet. Remained untranslated. Prosecutor William Finley, a firebrand who would later oppose the U.S. Constitution, called upon witnesses. Freeman, the diminutive trapper, hobbled forward, his slashed shoulder still suppurating. The engine butchered Smith like a hog. He shrieked under cross-examination. He conceded that Smith had brandished a flintlock, a detail omitted from official records. The lawyer, seizing the opportunity, invoked Blackstone's doctrine of fewer breaches, heat of passion provoked by the victim's own aggression. The tactic failed. McKean, a slave owner who would later legalize judicial flogging, sneered. Blackstone's principles apply to Englishmen, sir. This creature is not one. The defense's final witness, a rum trader named Silas Pratt, admitted under oath that he had sold Mamacata the fatal jug, yes, for double the usual price. Pratt shrugged. Indians can't handle their liquor. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. The lawyer's plea hung desperate. Who is truly responsible for poisoning his mind? Bryan's gavel silenced him. The law recognizes no justification for savagery. The jury, 12 white men, 5 of whom possessed deeds to Delaware land, deliberated for a mere 7 minutes. Guilty. Mamactaga, through Handlin's haze, understood enough. He rose, his chains clanking, and addressed McKean in fluent English. Your God is a deceiver. He preaches mercy, but trades it for blood. The gallery erupted. Deputies dragged him away, his laughter echoing through the rafters, a sound witnesses later likened to the cry of a lynx. In his cell, the lawyer penned a bitter reflection. We executed a man today for the offense of being what we made him. Outside, snow blanketed the courthouse, concealing the verdict beneath a pristine layer. The frontier had its spectacle, but in silencing Mamachaga, it revealed a stark truth. In 1786, American justice was a weapon forged not in Philadelphia's halls of power, but on the anvil of conquest. The gallows cast a long shadow over Fort Pitt. On March 15, 1786, its timbers, creaking under the weight of frontier justice. Mamachaga, his wrists raw from iron restraints, stood motionless as Sheriff Samuel Smith denied his final request. Let me run the plea. A Delaware tradition, affording warriors dignity in death, was met with a sneer. You'll run straight to hell. Smith retorted, his breath clouding the frigid air. For Mamachaga, the refusal cut deeper than the noose. To die bound was to imprison his spirit. A betrayal by men who at once considered his people allies. When the sentence was read, his face betrayed no fear, only a flicker of bitter recognition. Colonial court records claim he trembled like a sinner, but missionary accounts tell a different story. He laughed loud enough to startle the ravens. That laugh haunted the crowd, a sound less of madness than defiance, echoing the absurdity of a system that executed Indigenous men under laws they had no part in creating. Days earlier, Mama Chaga had sent a message through a Lopepi trapper, smuggling corn cakes into his cell. "Tell my people to bury their arrows with me. War breeds only orphans." The plea, unprecedented for a warrior of his stature, resonated through Delaware villages. Kilbook, the aging sachem, wept openly. He drank their poison, so our children might taste clean water, he confided to Moravian missionaries, though the gesture perplexed settlers. To them it was weakness, to the Delaware it was strategy, a calculated sacrifice to avert further bloodshed for dwindling tribes. Yet Mama Chaga's surrender was not passive. In his cell he etched symbols into moldy walls, a cross intertwined with the winged man of Delaware cosmology. When a guard mocked his heathen scribbles, Mama Chaga fixed him with a stare. "Your judges are Chua." Then Chua licks blood from the hangman's axe. The hybrid imagery, a fusion of Moravian sermons and ancestral beliefs, was no accident. Years earlier, he had sat at the edge of missionary campfires, absorbing their parables only to repurpose them as weapons. He used their Jesus like war paint, Grenadier School later told her granddaughter. The execution itself was a macabre spectacle. Joseph Ross, a white man condemned for crimes against nature, dangled first, a deliberate juxtaposition of sinner and savage. When Mama Chaga's turn arrived, the rope snapped, plunging him into the mud. The crowd gasped. Settlers whispered of divine intervention. "Even your God rebels." Mama Chaga roared, spitting dirt. The second noose held, but the damage was done. Frontier gossip transformed the botched hanging into legend. Some claim the earth itself rejected colonial justice. In his final hours, Mama Chaga's actions carved contradictions into history. Offered a bone knife to slit Ross's throat, a mercy to spare the man the shame of the noose. He flung the blade away. A warrior doesn't steal deaths. He spat. Yet that same night, he bartered for herbs to save the jailer's feverish son, prescribing pink root and willow bark with the precision of a Lopepi healer. As the child's breathing stabilized, the jailer murmured, "Why?" Mama Chaga's reply hung in the frigid air. "Your boy didn't build the gallows." His death, the first civil trial of a Native American west of the Allegheny, became a blueprint for conquest. Law books touted it as progress. Indigenous oral histories called it theater. Yet Mama Chaga's legacy defies simple categorization. In refusing vengeance and wielding compassion on his own terms, he exposed the hypocrisy of a nation that preached liberty while forging chains. The rope that killed him didn't just end a life. It unraveled the myth of American justice, thread by bloody thread. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories. Relive the forgotten sagas of America's frontier through meticulously researched tales. Hit subscribe to journey deeper into history.